I'm super excited for today's video because today we're looking at your logo designs. We'll be looking at a ton of inspirational brand identity work for everything from personal brands to SaaS platforms to ice cream shops. I'll be offering up feedback on what's working, calling out common mistakes to avoid, and highlighting best practices that you can use on your next logo design project. Let's get into it. Here we have a logo for the Merchant Ale House sent in by Jordan Versluis. In the case study, they say the Merchant Ale House is a restaurant and brew pub. They're known for handcrafted beers and quality pub food. They've been around for over 20 years and they've become a beloved staple where locals gather and friends are made. They put together a comprehensive brand identity that honors the restaurant's history and traditions while positioning it as the go-to destination for grain-to-glass beers. So as always, I love that you're giving us that context off the bat. That's always super helpful when seeing a logo design to understand what it's meant to represent, what are the goals, what's the overall feeling that you're trying to achieve. That gives us the context that we need to know if you succeeded or not, where that's a little bit difficult to do if it's just a logo design. So I love to see that. It definitely feels very brew pub, so it's very on brand. You can kind of tell exactly what it is by looking at it. This is really nice to see it on the packaging of the bottle and the glass. Again, it just drives home exactly what this is. It shows it in its natural element, seeing it in the restaurant itself. This is a really nice way to continue the brand identity apart from just the logo. So you're continuing to use those same fonts and colors to put together some different taglines and different elements that they can use on their various branding applications. I love this piece of photography because it's driving home what you talked about in the case study of going there and seeing the regulars and making new friends. So that's a great shot to have in the case study. And then showing it expanding to all these different use cases. So of course, when you're talking about brewing beer, you're gonna have a lineup of different beers. So seeing that it's kind of color coded for each beer is really nice. The coasters and merch and seeing it in the coolers. So this is a really great case study that's very comprehensive. I can tell that you know what you're doing when it comes to showcasing work and things like that. So incredible work there. And then this is really impactful as well to see the before and after. So we can see this is where they came from. Looks like a very local pub. The logo itself looks like it needs a bit of work to kind of modernize it, which you called out in the case study. And you've definitely done that. This is a huge improvement, so incredible work. As far as looking at the logo itself, I love this lamp illustration you have here. I will say that if you look closely, and this probably isn't something that a client or a user would necessarily recognize, but it just looks very live traced. It looks like kind of default vector lines, if you will, inside of the lamp itself. So that's something that's really quick to do, right? Just an illustrator doing the shading, some cross-hatching really quick with the pen tool. And that would make it a bit more custom, make it feel a bit more finished, I guess you could say. As far as the typography, again, I think you've nailed that brew pub aesthetic. For my taste, it is maybe like one too many fonts. I think we have 4 different fonts here from what I can tell. So for a logo like this, maybe that's a little bit much. Just having the word "the" in its own script font, maybe you could get away with eliminating that font from this logo just to simplify it a bit. Again, with 4 fonts, it just feels a little bit busy in that sense. And then the only other things I'm kind of seeing here, I like that you try to add some depth with the inlaid shadows here. They are so fine that even at this large size, it's a little bit challenging to make them out. It kind of competes with the logo itself. So for me, I think these flat versions are a lot more successful. They're just a lot easier to read and they just feel a bit more pleasing to the eye to me. And the other thing I'm seeing here is there's a very slight arch on the bottom of the text. I like that you've carried that over between both the vertical stack and the horizontal stack. That's not an easy thing to do. Obviously, they kind of behave differently. So you've done a really nice job of aligning those 2 arc angles to make them consistent. I think the thing I'm struggling with a little bit with that is that it's such a subtle arc that it almost feels like it's not even there if you don't recognize it. So I think that arc might be a bit more successful if it was more deliberate or not there at all. It feels like right now it's in no man's land where it's kind of in the middle of those 2. So Jordan, incredible work. Really, any feedback I'm giving on this is just nitpicking, super professional, really well done project. Amazing job. Okay, so this logo was sent in by Reddit user Adamator. He says, here's my logo and branding for Happy Roots, a landscaping service that focuses on friendly and fun service while providing excellent quality work. He says the client wanted to stick to a classic landscaping palette of green and brown while having a heavy focus on friendliness and a bit of playfulness, as most other landscaping services are a bit more dull and dry. So just initial reaction, I definitely think that brief comes through in the logo. So that's a check mark right there where it definitely screams happy, friendly, and it's definitely different than other landscaping companies. And yet you've taken some of those recognizable aspects as far as the colors and imagery that you're using, and it still drives home that it's nature, it's landscaping. So great work there. Initial reactions that you're hitting a lot of points on that brief. Here in this first image, it's really cool that you've kind of matched the angle of the photo of this trowel to match the swoop and the R. So that's a really nice touch there that shows that you're paying attention to the little details. I do think this image is competing a little bit with the logo. So like the green of the Y is kind of getting lost on this pale blue. The brown of the smiley part of the icon is getting lost on the brown of the background, potentially dulling this background image a little bit, maybe blurring it. That would make it a bit more legible. So that would be a recommendation I have there. We see here you've resolved that by kind of using the white version on these images. So maybe that's something to call in the brand guide, is that whenever you're using this logo over imagery that's a little bit darker, that you use a one color version, because I think these are very successful. I love these photos that you're using. Again, it definitely shows friendly. It shows these beautifully landscaped gardens. We're kind of seeing the contrast of the different logo lockups on display here, where the white logos are really easy to read. And then the brown of the smileys, again, getting lost a little bit on these darker colors. So something to look at there. I love this pattern that you're bringing in of all the different gardening tools and this fun illustration style. You have a little HR lockup here in this pattern. So I love that pattern. That's a really great brand identity element that you've created and incorporated there. This is a really nice breakdown showing your rationale, your thought behind the logo process. I love to see that you took Enter and you've made some edits to it. So it's not just using the base font, but you've actually changed some of the letter forms. Obviously, you've made the smiley face. You've elongated a couple of them. So this is a really nice rationale. Again, we're seeing that pattern. I think that works really well. I love that you're doing kind of like a cutout of the people and using as a background element. Seeing the social posts here, kind of like an example post, I'm guessing, and then a mock-up of the different stationery. So I think that's all working really well. I think this website mock-up could use a bit of love as far as just having like big buttons here at the top. That's usually not the way that navs look, right? So usually it's kind of like home, services, about us would be text, and then contact would be a big button in the top right maybe. And then this happy plant star with happy roots. I love that copywriting you've done there. So I love to see that you're doing a bit of that as well. As far as that text placement, I think maybe making that like a hero that's centered over these images might be a bit more successful. It feels a little bit lost up here, closer to the navigation. So this might be a mock-up here to modernize. This van looks awesome with the pattern used on some of the trim. The hat looks great. I love that you've put like an embroidery effect on the logo. So really nice attention to detail. And so here we're seeing that full color lockup, and it's working really well on the light colors. So again, maybe that's the delineation, and the brand guide is the full color goes on lighter backgrounds. The one color goes on those darker backgrounds to make sure that legibility is achieved. And yeah, so this is an incredible project. Lots of great mock-ups and brand identity use cases. So as far as the overarching logo goes, you definitely get that smiley face. Like, this is so much fun. It's really clever to be able to create that from plants and soil and the roots to really driving home the actual name of the company by using imagery. So the image can stand alone and you still see that it's Happy Roots, or the text is strong enough as well to where this word mark would work on its own too. So I love that those two elements work independently, or they work really well together. I will say that the addition of landscaping here in this version of the logo feels a little bit added on, like late in the game maybe. The really small font and the wide letter spacing, I'm not sure that it's working really well. The other elements are so well thought through and well crafted. The landscaping part feels like a bit of an afterthought, so I might look at that maybe a different font, maybe lessening the tracking a little bit to make it easier to read, potentially finding a different solution for that. That feels a bit like the outlier of this logo. And then the only other thing is that the roots in the smile feel a little bit like crooked teeth, I guess you could say. So I don't know if there's maybe something there where the roots could have been a bit more tooth-like, a bit more like straight teeth, more of like a smile. Like, I think it works as is. I love the logo, but that's just one other thing that kind of caught my eye that could potentially be made a little bit friendlier looking, I guess you could say. But Adam, overall, this is an incredible case study. I love the logo. It's so much fun. It's one of those ones that you see and you just want like a hat or something that has the logo on it, because it puts a smile on your face, which is exactly what the brief set out to do. So I think you've nailed it. So again, thanks for sending it in. Awesome work. Okay, so here we have a logo sent in by Reddit user Surfing Toaster. They say they're currently working on a website about UX design aimed at new professionals in the field. It's still in development, so they don't have exported case studies of the logo, but rather sent the logo as part of the actual website that we're seeing here. So to get a better look at it, I'm going to zoom in. So I think this is a really well thought out logo. I think it's doing a lot of different things, but it's not busy. So that's kind of exactly what logos are all about, is creating a simple, elegant solution that's easy to read, that's reducible, that gets across a fairly complex idea. And so that's exactly what this does, right? So the first thing you see is a person with their hands up in the air. So they're kind of like happy, they're celebrating, but then you kind of realize that the person is made up of the letter U, and then the legs are the letter X, but then the top of the U kind of gives it that gestalt of the X. So I definitely get the U, the X, and the person immediately. A great accomplishment there to get across all of that very quickly, very simply. So a really nice job there. As far as the typography goes, it's very minimal, it's very modern. It definitely feels appropriate for a UX learning solution platform like this. So I think you've done really well there. Something I'm struggling with a little bit is that the icon being the same height as the U, it just feels a little bit small. So it's kind of competing with the word mark. So maybe making that icon a little bit larger, or finding another way to create a hierarchy there might be helpful, just because right now it's kind of competing with the U as far as legibility goes. As far as kind of the brand identity of the site, I like these colors, the beige and kind of the baby blue. I like these illustrations. This line art look combined with vector is very on trend right now, kind of like the Humans approach to vector illustrated people, if you guys are familiar with that. So these are really nice custom illustrations you have here in iconography. You've used a kind of fun, funky font here for your different headers, where it's very modern, but it has some squared parts to it that help it stand out from just more generic sans serifs, I guess you could say. So yeah, I don't have a ton of critiques. I think the logo is really well thought out. I think your word mark matches well. I think maybe again, just playing with the sizing of the icon to the word mark might help from a hierarchy and legibility standpoint. So yeah, I'm excited to see the case study of this, seeing it all come together, but I think this is a really nice mark. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the review so far and you're finding the feedback valuable for your own work. If you are, please be sure to like this video, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. As a small content creator, every engagement helps and I really appreciate it. Oh, and if you want your logo design reviewed in a future episode, drop a link to your work in the comments below. All right, enough of that. Back to the reviews. Okay, so this logo is for an ice cream shop inspired by Scoopy Doo called Scoopy Doo. I love the name. Scoopy Doo is one of my favorite cartoons, so this is really a fun project. This was submitted by Reddit user Time Nebula 9797. As far as the brief, they say, here's a scoop of refreshment in the scorching heat. Enjoy this fresh branding post for Scoopy Doo. Inspired by the beloved old cartoon Scooby-Doo, this ice cream parlor with a retro vibe serves all flavors and forms of ice cream imaginable. The dramatic swashes and curly cues and the word mark give lots of movement to the design, and the tight letter spacing with the bottom heavy fonts and round bulging shapes give it a groovy look. The cherry on top is the flower icon from Scooby-Doo Gang's van, the Mystery Machine. So first off, I love that write-up. I think that's a really important piece to include with logo designs wherever possible. So instead of just showing the design, including some copywriting that's written in the brand voice, that's really great to include alongside of it, just to kind of set the tone, to show your rationale, to tell people why you did what you did. and just get them in that mindset, right? If you think about it, anytime you're seeing a logo in real life, it's very rarely just a logo on its own, right? You're in a store, so you see the logo, there's also signage, there's marketing, there's the employees, they're talking to you, there's messaging, there's all types of branding, and it's all living together in harmony in a brand system, right? So while we're here to review logos, I think that anytime that you can show your logo in context with mock-ups, with copywriting, patterns or icons or illustrations, whatever the case may be, I think that's so much more impactful to give it that context. And so I definitely recommend doing that anytime you can. Just give that extra bit of context to your logo designs, because it's going to make them that much more impactful. So off the top, that's a great first impression. Looking at the logo design itself, obviously this is super fun. It's really clever to tie in the flower shape from the mystery machine. Obviously that's a really recognizable element, but it's not the main element. So you've taken kind of a secondary element from the show and made it your primary element. So that's a really fun and smart way to do that. I love that you're showing the context of the logo on the packaging, so we can kind of see again how that brand identity is coming together. It's showing us where the logo is actually going to live rather than just seeing it on its own. Some kind of art-directed photography here, as well as a subtitle, again doing a bit of copywriting. Seeing some really fun stickers here, again some more really fun copywriting. So this is a really entertaining project, something that we can definitely see your passion for, and you've thought through all the different aspects of it. Overall, great job on this case study. As far as the actual logo design itself, let's jump in there. So I think you've done a good job of capturing that vintage feeling. You've done a nice job of filling the space, so finding the space to put this flower into the logo without it feeling imbalanced. It can also be challenging to use exclamation points in logos, so you've done a nice job of balancing those aspects together. From a typography standpoint, I think the curly cues are throwing me a little bit. I do like that effect and definitely adds to the kind of like 70s feeling of this, but each one is just a little bit different and not all of them are symmetrical. So that's something I would look at, is maybe resolving those corners and roundness a little bit. I think the curly Q on the C is a bit problematic here, where it almost starts looking like a G because the curly Q is so intense compared to the other ones. So I think dialing back that curly Q in the C would help with legibility quite a bit. I do also feel like the typography, while being retro, it feels retro in a more like classical kind of way, if that makes sense. Whereas looking at the actual Mystery Machine logo, it feels a bit more funky flower child. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. And I think that's also kind of reflected in the color scheme, right? So in the Mystery Machine, it was like orange and green and blue, whereas here it's pretty much only pink. So I think that would have been an opportunity to, again, drive home kind of that Scooby Doo feeling that everyone's familiar with, where with all the pink, it's getting lost a little bit. We kind of started to see that a little bit here looking at the packaging with all the different colors. There's like a green and a yellow. Again, they feel a little bit different from the actual Mystery Machine colors, which are a bit more funky. So this could have been a nice opportunity to, again, tie it in a bit more directly without being too derivative, but just making that connection really clear. So overall, I think this is a great case study. Again, I love the copywriting you did. I love all of the context that you showed us with all the different product photography. You've really thought through a lot of different aspects of this brand identity, and I love to see that. I think just from a logo standpoint, I would look at making it a little bit more legible by cleaning up some of those curly cues, making them a bit more consistent, and then potentially leaning a bit more into the funky side of the Mystery Machine as far as colors, and even kind of the type treatment in that sense. But overall, amazing project, nice work. Okay, so here we have a logo by Reddit user Hasnan. They mentioned that they're 15, which is insane to me that they're doing this level of work at age 15, but that shows you how far that design has come. So this is a logo for a toy company called Block. They bring imagination to life with their innovative designs tailored for young children. So I love that you're starting us off with that context as far as what the company is, and then you're giving us even more context about the logo. You say here the logo embodies simplicity and vibrancy, mirroring the essence of the bricks they offer for young minds to build and create. Crafted from basic shapes, it symbolizes accessibility and the foundation of learning through play. Vibrant colors evoke joy and excitement, reflecting the playful spirit and endless possibilities that define the Block brand. So this is another great way to start us off with some rationale about the logo and why you made the choices that you made. I definitely see a lot of those things coming through immediately. The colors kind of allude to that it's for children. The letters look like blocks that they could play with. So just my initial reactions that you're hitting a lot of points of that brief. It's nice here to see it as one color on all of the different brand colors that you've established. You start showing us some different mock-ups. You show us that the B can kind of be a standalone icon. So that's a nice way to expand this logo. Something that you're missing, I think, from a mock-ups perspective is kind of showing us like the toys, right? The blocks. After giving us that great introduction about what the brand is, what the logo's drawing on, it'd be really nice to see those actual blocks. Maybe you're even using the blocks to create the logo. That'd be really fun. Or if you can't do that, then making a 3D mock-up that kind of shows the letter forms as 3D. Again, alluding to those children's toys that you mentioned in the opening. These mock-ups just kind of feel like generic swag as far as like pins and buttons and bracelets. When you have a company that's this much fun and a brand that's this much fun, you definitely want to carry that through to the mock-ups, right? As far as the logo itself, again, I think you've nailed the brief. I think this definitely comes through exactly what it is without being incredibly overt. So excellent job there. Using the B as a standalone element is really clever to kind of make this brand identity more expandable, but currently the B feels a little bit generic on its own. So maybe there's something that you can do to make that B a bit more distinctive, a bit more memorable. I think that would help it just be more of a standalone element instead of just the B pulled from the logo, if that makes sense. Apart from that, something else I'm noticing here from a typography standpoint is that it feels like the B and the K are kerned a bit further out, whereas LOC reads all as one lockup. So potentially tightening up the kerning on the B and the K just so slightly, so that way it all reads in one go a little bit easier. I think that would help it out. But overall, this is a great mark. I really love it. The fact that you're only 15 is absolutely insane. I absolutely was not doing work like this when I was 15, so keep it up. Awesome job. Here we have a logo for Reddit user Federicus. They say this is a personal logo using their initials, FF. They're a video editor and photographer who would like to avoid using imagery that's a bit too on the nose to those specific fields. They want something that's minimal and graphic that they can use on their website, online communication, and documents. They feel like they have a good start, but maybe just need to make some tweaks to get it over the line. So I love where this is heading. It's very modern. It's very clean and minimal and approachable, so I like that. The cuts on the end of the letter forms are a nice touch. They give it some visual interest. It makes it a little bit edgy. It adds to the modern feel of it, but it does come across as imbalanced. And so I think why that is basically it looks like it would topple over if this was a real object, right? So just quickly doing an outline here, we can see that this is kind of the overarching shape of the logo. And so it's not a particularly flattering outer shape that this logo is creating. It kind of lacks symmetry, it lacks balance. So I think that's kind of the main problem that we're seeing here and why you felt like you were getting there, but it just wasn't quite where you wanted it to be. And so I do think the double F is legible. You can definitely read that. I think combining the two letters where you've combined them here on this crossbar, it's adding a bit of tension to the logo that maybe is also kind of adding to that potentially unfinished feeling that you're getting from it. So I think my advice here would be to look at ways to make it more symmetrical. Potentially matching the sizes of the two Fs could be one way to do that, or rearranging them to where they just kind of create a shape that's a little bit more flattering. So just really quickly, I went in and kind of started spitballing some ideas here. Certainly not polished in any way. I don't think this one here on the right is very successful, but at least you can kind of see what I'm getting at as far as making it more balanced, a bit more symmetrical. So I think here on the left, having the Fs be the same size is kind of something that you could look at running with, because I think that's kind of working where it just looks more balanced, right? It's creating like a nice right angle. All of the ends of the different crossbars and everything are ending on that same right angled plane. So I think that's helping. A lot of the times you see these monograms that have these descenders that will kind of intersect in the middle of other letters. And maybe this comes across. So again, these are very quick and dirty ideas here, but I think that there's something here kind of building off of what you have that could just make it feel a little bit less like it's going to topple over, remove some of that tension from combining the two Fs in the way you have, and then also kind of resolving this where like the top of this F is pretty close to the crossbar of this F. So again, there is a separation here, but just to the eye optically, it looks like these are all in the same plane. And again, it just makes it feel like it's a bit top heavy. So I would look at that as well. I think from a typography standpoint, I know that's something that you mentioned that you're struggling with as well. I don't know what your actual name is here, so I just made up a name for you, but I think since your mark is something that's very modern, it's a little bit busier, I would say, for a logo design. I think you could keep the text pretty simple. So I think aligning your typography as well as the sizing of it to the letter forms in the logo, I think that's kind of a nice way to tie things together. Again, create some visual leading lines here. So this crossbar kind of leads you to the typography, and then this one does as well. So that's something to play around with there. So yeah, I think this is a good logo, a great start. Again, I would just kind of play around with making it look a bit more symmetrical, a bit more visually balanced so it doesn't look like it's tipping over. Play around with different ways to repeat the F, and then also look at some ways to potentially disconnect the F in the way that you have it here to see what other ways could you possibly combine these two letter forms. So awesome work. I can't wait to see the finished product. All right, so this logo is submitted by Reddit user Bananaphile. He says, I'm a Swiss interactive media designer for about 5 years. He works in both video and graphic design. He wanted to create a logo using his name Nathan that is both clean and minimal. So the first thing I think of when I see this logo is like a Japanese signature stamp. I think it's called a hanko. So I really like that. I like the aesthetic. It is very minimal and clean, so you definitely accomplished that. Something I'm struggling with here is legibility. So taking your name and putting it onto 2 lines makes it read like not Han, and then also reading that second A here at the bottom. I get that you're using the A for both the top and bottom to create kind of a connection there, but it's definitely affecting the legibility of the logo. So I would recommend revisiting that, figuring out a different solve that increases legibility. Something that might help with that is honestly just kind of putting it all in one line. I think dividing it up into 2 lines is causing an issue right now. I do like the square aesthetic, so I get why you're wanting to go that direction, but again, it's going to be a bit of a trade-off between legibility and that symmetry of using a square shape. Looking at some of the other elements here, the outer bounding box looks like it's a thicker weight than the letters, which kind of competes with reading it once again, just because your eyes are drawn to that holding shape instead of the letters themselves. Another thing that becomes a little bit problematic, you can start seeing it here at the smaller size, and even this on my screen is bigger than it would probably be in a social profile picture or something like that, but the thin lines separating everything, it's really nice that they're very consistent, but they might just be a bit too thin to where they start getting lost a little bit at these smaller sizes. It ends up looking a bit abstract, again, instead of reading as your name. So Nathan, I love the logo. I think you did a great job with it. I think the main issue I'm having, again, is just that legibility. So I think addressing a few of those concerns, making sure that it reads as Nathan, that the A's are legible, maybe add a bit more spacing between each letter, and then looking to see if you can accomplish the same effect in a rectangle instead of breaking up your name into 2 lines. All of those things I think would help out with the legibility while still keeping that clean and minimal aesthetic that you're going for. So here we have a logo from Unknown Kajo on Reddit. They are a graphic communications student, and this is for their personal brand that they're currently developing. They wanted to create something that shows a fun personality and has the potential to add motion to it in the future. They say currently it's just a face around the nose, which is also the letter J, which is their initial. And so kind of the concept behind this of adding motion is that on a website, the eyes of this logo would follow the cursor around. So I love that idea. That's super fun. So this logo has a ton of character. I love that it looks like the old Rubber Hose cartoons. I love that design aesthetic. You definitely do see that J, so that's definitely coming through. I think something I'm struggling with is that the I's currently read as O's. So to me, I read this as ojo, which that's kind of a fun tie-in because ojo means eye in Spanish, and obviously the eyes are a big part of this logo. But if that's not what you're going for, then that is definitely something to look at, just to make sure that the J is the hero and that the eyes aren't competing with it. So potentially making those eyes a bit smaller, or just looking at adding some detail into them to make them look a bit less like O's. I think something else to look at too is playing around with how this logo is going to live in the real world. I know you mentioned using it in a website header to have the eyes fall around the cursor, so that's a lot of fun. But as far as actually using this beside typography, I think the shape is a little bit awkward to where that might be challenging to do. So looking at ways to make the overall shape of the logo a bit more pleasing to the eye, whereas right now the overarching shape is a little bit abstract, I would say. Another thing to look at, I don't know what your other initial is, but if your other initial could potentially be worked into a face in some way, then that could be a really nice solve here, just to get across both of your initials while still driving home the face. Again, potentially eliminating the chances of it being misread. I actually did something fairly similar with a face and a smiley for a charity I worked with called Necessities for Children. So you can kind of see how I worked with the different letters to create a face and get that same effect, but still driving home all of the different letters in the name. So I love how unique this logo is. It's a ton of fun. It has so much character. I love where it's going, so definitely keep going this direction. Again, my feedback would just be to make it more easily read, making sure the eyes don't read like O's. Again, maybe by utilizing a bit more of a rubber hose style eyeball there, that could potentially help with that. And then finally, just experimenting and making sure that this works well with however you're going to do the word mark, whether that's your full name or whatever the case may be. And then looking at how it's going to work in context. So making sure that the shape of it fits where you want it to fit and that it's not causing any issues there. But again, great job. Thanks so much for sending it in. Okay, so this logo was sent in by Reddit user Sechin, if I'm saying that correctly. Another 15-year-old designer, so that's crazy. So they say that this logo was submitted for a logo context for the SPFF, an organization that plans the annual French Celebration Week in my province. So first reaction, it definitely feels festive with the stars and all the different colors. It's quite bold with the font choice. It's just a very thick sans serif, so it's very easy to read. It's very in your face. I like that you've kind of showed us the old version of the logo to the new version. Definitely think this is a large improvement from what they're coming from, so nice job there. One thing you've done a huge improvement on is the kind of the secondary text. So they had it as a circle around the outside. Very difficult to read that it goes upside down. So you fixed that by putting it out here to the side of the logo. So it definitely seems like you've accomplished a lot of what you've set out to do as far as simplifying it, making it easier to read, easier to print, and more vibrant. I think you've checked all of those boxes. It's kind of the only trick, I guess you could say, that you've included in this logo, but I really like it is the inclusion of this star here. So it kind of shows you why the F's are cut how they are. And so I think that's really clever to use the star to cut out the ends of the F to kind of tie that all together. I will say I wish the logo maybe had one more trick to it, or maybe you just take that star and kind of extrapolate that to a bit more of an identity. It just feels like once you've kind of discovered that, that's all the logo has as far as like visual tricks going on. The rest of it feels a little bit utilitarian, I guess you could say. So again, I think that star idea and using that cutout is really clever. It's really strong. So I think that has legs, and I would recommend expanding that to the rest of the identity, finding ways that you can incorporate that star in other parts of the logo, or at least other applications of the logo. As far as this secondary text over here being all lowercase, the line spacing is really tight. So while you've definitely increased the legibility leaps and bounds from the original to the new version, I do still think that this secondary text is going to be hard to read at smaller sizes, just because it's very close together. It's all lowercase, so I think there could potentially be some issues there. It is a lot of text, so it's a difficult thing to solve for, but something I might look at there. As far as all the different colors, I wish I had a bit more context I know that you mentioned down here that these are the Akkadian colors and the Akkadian star. So that's nice that you've shared that logic. So I get this lockup here, but then there's also kind of like the rainbow color palette. So I wish I had a bit of context as to why that is the way it is. Why is the star here green instead of being yellow like it was originally? I wish I had some context as to why there's two different color palettes, right? To me, it just feels like there's so many colors here that it's a bit difficult for me to figure out what the actual brand colors are. From a typography standpoint, with this being a celebration, it's very vibrant and colorful. It feels like the font you've selected is a bit utilitarian. There's just not a lot going on with it that says celebration or fun. I do like that you focus on legibility, so I understand that, but I think maybe a font that has a little bit more going on, a little bit more fun, could really drive home that celebration theme that you're trying to get across here. And I think one other thing that we're seeing is that while I do love that star being included between the Fs, and I think it works in the full color, I think we can see here that it doesn't work as a one color logo. So whenever you do an all white logo, you still have that star in yellow, or the all black and the star is still in yellow. So if a goal of this is to make it very printable, there's bound to be one color print applications, whether that's embroidered on a shirt or something like that. Right now, I don't see a way to make this one color with the current design. So that might be something to think through, is just adding like a cutout around the star to where this could be all one color black. So the star is black, the type is black. So that's something that I do for every logo I design, is just to make sure it works full color, one color black, one color white, or whatever else the brand needs. But that's a potential issue you might run into with this logo. Overall, nice work. Again, the fact that you're 15 is insane. Keep at it. Again, I love the star motif that you've incorporated into the F. I think just continuing to expand upon that, finding ways to utilize a star throughout the rest of the logo, or show us the whole brand identity system. I would love to see this expanded more. So yeah, if you have a case study of this you eventually put together, I would love to take a look at that. But overall, great job. Okay, and here we have a logo for Kimbohpeep. She says this is a personal logo that she uses online for her online persona. So this is a lot of fun. You can immediately see the rabbit come through. I like the color pink that you're using here. I like the expressions you have on the different characters' faces. I think something I'm struggling with a bit on this one is legibility. So I think probably the most legible and usable version as a logo is the third version here. The other two, with it being so thick and the separation between the letters being so thin, that's going to lead to issues when you try to reproduce this at smaller sizes. And it just kind of is a bit less legible. So I think using this outlined version on the right is definitely the one that has the most legs. If we zoom in here and just kind of look at the details, I can kind of see that the nose is overlapping the space between the letters here. So that's something to clean up. It also looks like this rectangle at the bottom here has some kind of not straight edges. So I would make that either a perfect rectangle or make all the edges rounded if that's the direction that you're heading with it. From an overall lockup standpoint, I think these all have a bit of trouble as far as the icon interacting with the typography. So here on the left, we have typography that's been kind of like squished and rotated. So I would stay away from squishing text whenever possible. So I think these other two typographic treatments are a bit more successful. I think this one on the right here, again, is probably the most successful of the three. Putting this one at an angle here, again, makes it a bit challenging to read. And so that's something that we want to make sure that we're focusing on is legibility when it comes to logos. And I think something else is playing with the sizing of the icon to the word mark, right? So here we have this really big icon and all three of them in very small text. And so when you make this small, that small text is going to become really small. And so it's going to become very challenging to read. So I would play with that hierarchy as far as making the text a bit larger and the icon a bit smaller, a bit more like a traditional logo lockup. So I definitely think you're heading in the right direction. Again, I think number 3 is the strongest of them. So that's the one I would keep iterating on. I would play with the typography again to work on the sizing of that in comparison to the logo. I would clean up a couple of those little things we talked about, the eye and the nose. And overall, I do feel like it could definitely still be refined from a shape perspective. I definitely think you're getting there, but just keep iterating, keep playing with it. It's a super fun logo, amazing work. Okay guys, thanks so much to all of the talented designers that sent in your work to be reviewed. We saw some awesome work today. I hope you found it inspirational and picked up some tips for your next logo design project. Thanks so much for tuning in. Now go out there and make a ruckus.